Soviet Union might no longer exist and present-day Russia might have taken the back burner on space exploration, but in truth, they were the very first to reach space. The Soviet Union sent probes to space, the Moon, and Venus way before even the United States. These probes took classified images of Venus, and while it was all exciting back then, there was nothing out of the ordinary. But a recent analysis of these images has revealed some terrifying discoveries that might be present on the surface of Venus. Did the Soviet Union capture signs of life on Venus? And what recent discoveries have been made about a planet that was once thought to be uninhabitable? Venus is the second largest terrestrial planet in the solar system and has a surface gravity that is a lot more similar to Earth than any other rocky planet in the solar system. It's always been a misconception that Mars is the closest planet to Earth, but that is simply not the truth, as Venus is actually a lot closer to Earth and is sometimes termed Earth's twin. And in terms of distance, Venus gets as much as 38 million kilometers close to the Earth. This is much shorter than the closest distance between Earth and Mars, which is around 55 million kilometers. Also, in terms of size, Venus is a lot more like Earth, boasting 95% of Earth's diameter and having 81% the mass of Earth, which again is more similar to Earth than Mars, which has just 10% the mass of the Earth. So why does Venus have such a bad rep, and why has Mars been painted as Earth's sister planet instead? Well, this is because Venus has an extremely dense atmosphere, which is composed of over 96% carbon dioxide and more than 3% nitrogen, both existing on the planet's surface. But that isn't all. The atmospheric pressure on Venus is exceptionally high, almost 93 times the atmospheric pressure on Earth. The surface pressure on Venus is about 4.1 pounds per cubic feet, which is the pressure equivalent of being 1 kilometer under the ocean. And the carbon dioxide atmosphere of Venus creates the strongest greenhouse effect observed anywhere in the solar system. This results in a surface temperature of over 864 degrees Fahrenheit, making the surface of Venus hotter than even Mercury, which is twice as close to the Sun. For comparison, Mercury has a minimum surface temperature of minus 364 degrees Fahrenheit and a maximum temperature of around 800 degrees Fahrenheit. Even with Venus receiving barely 25% of Mercury's solar exposure, it still somehow generates a higher surface temperature. This high temperature has been attributed to the presence of carbon dioxide on the planet's surface and has been used as a model for the effects of climate change here on Earth. The surface temperature of Venus isn't the only strange thing about the planet. Orbiting the Sun at a distance of 108 million kilometers, Venus completes one orbit every 234 days. But unlike all the planets in the solar system except Uranus, Venus has a rather strange clockwise axial rotation. This means on Venus, the Sun rises in the west and sets in the east. Also, most planets in our solar system have elliptical orbits, meaning they're slightly tilted on their axis, but Venus is the only planet with a near-circular axial rotation, having an eccentricity less than 0.01. With a rotational speed of barely 6 kilometers per hour, Venus has the slowest rotation of any planet in our solar system, completing one axial rotation in 243 Earth days, meaning a day on Venus lasts longer than a year on the planet. But this slow axial rotation has the opposite effect on the planet's wind speed. Despite the Earth rotating more than 200 times faster than Venus, the planet still boasts wind speed of up to 300 kilometers per hour, almost matching top wind speeds here on Earth. And unlike every other planet in the solar system except Mercury, Venus has no moons or satellites orbiting it, though it has been speculated by astronomers that Mercury could have in fact been Venus's moon during the early days of the planet's formation, but it was either knocked out or simply pulled away from the weak gravitational and magnetic force of the planet. Being one of the most visible stars in the night sky, Venus has been observed for centuries. We should be able to view the planet's surface using telescopes here on Earth. But viewing the Venusian surface from Earth in light is impossible, as the entire planet is covered by an opaque layer of sulfuric clouds that reflect light from penetrating through to the surface. In other words, despite Venus being closer to the Sun than Earth, it receives less sunlight on the ground than we do here on Earth. Studies of Venus have indicated that the planet could have had an atmosphere billions of years ago, much similar to the one found on Earth during its early years. These studies suggest that there might have even been enormous amounts of liquid water on the surface of the planet. But due to the planet's proximity to the Sun, these bodies of water would have evaporated as a result of the increasing luminosity of the Sun as it grew in size over billions of years. This evaporation would have released free hydrogen into the atmosphere, which in turn would have been swept into interplanetary space by solar winds. This would have been possible because, unlike Earth, Venus lacks an internally induced magnetic field, which would have served to hold molecules such as hydrogen in the atmosphere. This dissipation of water would have led to a massive greenhouse effect and released an astronomical level of greenhouse gases into the planet's atmosphere. But although Venus has an inhospitable atmosphere uninhabitable to any Earth-like life form, there is a region in the upper cloud layers of the planet where temperatures are similar to those found on Earth, but more on that later. Venus might have an odd and frankly terrifying atmosphere, but the planet's surface is equally just as strange. The Venusian surface is filled with dozens of volcanoes, all of which have contributed to shaping the planet's rocky surface. Venus has as many as 167 different volcanic complexes, each over 100 kilometers wide and filled with volcanoes of different sizes. Putting that into perspective, the only place on Earth with a nearly large enough volcanic complex is Hawaii. Now multiply Hawaii's volcanic terrain by 167. There has been recorded evidence of volcanic activity on the surface of Venus. Between 1978 and 1986, there was a significant drop in the sulfur dioxide concentrations of the planet's atmosphere. Then in 2006, there was a massive surge in sulfur dioxide concentration, indicating that there have been massive supplies of sulfur dioxide to the atmosphere by volcanic eruptions. But volcanoes aren't the only significant structures on the surface of Venus, as the planet is filled with hundreds of thousands of craters. These craters range in size up to 280 kilometers, with none smaller than 3 kilometers, due to the effects the dense atmosphere has on impacting objects. Objects of a certain size are significantly slowed by the thick sulfuric atmosphere and might not survive the entry and hence do not make impact on the surface. Only larger asteroids and objects are able to weather the thick, acid-filled atmosphere and impact the planet's surface, therefore creating these large impact craters. Incoming asteroids less than 100 meters in diameter will burn up in the atmosphere long before reaching the ground. Venus's proximity to Earth made it a prime destination for the earliest interplanetary explorations ever embarked on by humans, and this interest in exploring Venus was heightened during the Cold War when the Soviet Union and the United States sought ways to outdo each other. Both countries initiated interplanetary space programs with the main aim of showcasing their technological, military, and political sovereignty to the world. The Soviets were the first to launch the first orbiting satellite, Sputnik 1, on October 4, 1957, and followed shortly after with the Sputnik 2, carrying the first orbiting animal Lila. The United States followed suit a few months later in February of 1958 with the launch of the Explorer 1. Having made it into orbit, both nations set their sights on the Moon, and the race was on. The United States made a series of unsuccessful satellite launch attempts with the Pioneer program in 1958, only to be beaten to the punch by the Soviets in 1959. The Soviet Luna 1 became the very first space probe to perform a flyby of the Moon, and shortly after, the Luna 2 became the very first artificial object to crash land on the Moon's surface. With the Moon conquered, both superpowers turned their attention to Earth's closest planet, and surely enough, the Soviets beat the US to the punch yet again, but they did a lot more than just observe the planet. Venera 1 missions. The Soviet Union launched the Venera 1 mission, taking the mark as the first robotic space probe to journey to Venus or any other planets in the solar system. Although the mission was a failure, Venera 1 completed 3 successful telemetry sessions and collected some of the very first solar wind and cosmic ray data surrounding the Earth. Following the failure of the Soviet Union's Venera 1 mission, the United States launched the Mariner space probe on its first journey to Venus, and on the 14th of December 1962, the space probe came within 34,000 kilometers of the surface of Venus. The probe was able to gather the very first data on the planet's surface, measuring the planet's temperature distribution as well as the interplanetary magnetic field and charged particles of the Venusian surface. The Mariner space probe was able to determine that Venus, although having an extremely hot surface, also had a layer of cool clouds above the ground. But soon after relaying its data back to Earth, Mission Control lost contact with the probe. The Soviet Union took it up a notch with the launch of the Venera 4 mission in 1967, which was the very first probe to observe an in-depth analysis of Venus's surface. Learning from its previously failed missions, the Soviets equipped Venera 4 with improved heat shields able to withstand up to 20,000 degrees Fahrenheit and surface pressures of up to 25 atmospheres. The probe, however, never made it to the surface as communication was lost as it entered the Venusian atmosphere, proving that temperature and pressure assumptions were nothing compared to the actual state of the planet's atmosphere. The Soviets' next attempt, however, became a success for science as the Venera 7 not only succeeded in penetrating the thick Venusian atmosphere, but became the very first probe to soft land on the planet's surface. The probe transmitted 53 minutes worth of data on the temperature of Venus back to Earth. This provided valuable information on the planet's surface structure and composition, but not even the Venera 7 could withstand the intense acidic heat and bone-crushing pressure of Venus, and soon enough, transmission was lost with the probe. The Venera 9 became the most successful space probe launched by the Soviets in 1975. This probe sent back accurate measurements of the planet's atmosphere, revealing that clouds were between 30 to 40 kilometers thick, and also gave the first detailed composition of the atmosphere, revealing the presence of chemicals like bromine, hydrochloric acid, and iodine. It also revealed that the surface pressure on the planet's surface had been greatly underestimated, thought to be around 20 atmospheres, but was actually up to 90 atmospheres. The probe also sent back the very first pictures of the Venusian surface, revealing rocks on the ground. Following the success of Venera 9, Venera 10 was also launched, taking several pictures, and was active for well over 65 minutes before crumbling underneath the heat and pressure. Venera 13 was by far the most important lander to reach the surface of Venus, as it was active for up to 127 minutes on the surface. It not only took the most detailed pictures of the surface, but also drilled into the ground for samples and seismic measurements, and also had a microphone which recorded the sounds on the surface in real time. At the time when the pictures from the Venera missions were analyzed, they were exciting to say the least, being the very first pictures from the surface of another planet, but nothing out of the ordinary appeared. But a recent analysis has led scientists to believe that Venera 13 captured more than just rocks. Fast forward to January of 2012, when a renowned Russian scientist reported he had discovered signs of living objects while taking a more detailed analysis of the Venera 13 images. Dr. Leonid Sanfomality, a senior researcher at the Russian Academy of Science, published a paper detailing his in-depth analysis of the panoramic images taken by Venera 13, stating he found objects that exhibit some traits of living organisms. He analyzed some of the images taken by two different cameras on Venera 13 and found some relatively large objects that appeared to change in size from a decimeter to half a meter. Reportedly, the objects didn't just appear to change in size, but were present in some images and absent in others. The first object he noticed was the disk, which didn't appear to be any part of the lander, which might have detached and measured about 0.3 meters in diameter. He hypothesized that the position or shape of the disk, which is indicated by arrow A in the image, changed relative to the lander. At the 72-minute frame, it appeared that the disk developed an arc, and at the 86-minute frame, the arc of the disk lengthened and became fragmented. Another intriguing object was a scorpion-like object appearing at around the 90th minute of the lander observation. At first, the assumption was that since the lander had been operating for almost 90 minutes before the object appeared, it was a result of faulty parts of the camera succumbing to the heat and pressure. But this theory was quickly discarded as the lander operated for an additional hour after the object appeared and in pristine operational condition before failing. This revealed that the system was still operational and there was no reason to suspect the cameras were failing and producing blurry spots which might have explained the bizarre image. Explaining in detail, Dr. Leonid stated in his reports, "On the first image, 7 minutes, on the ejected soil is a shallow oblong groove visible with its length about 100 millimeters. In the second image, 20 minutes, sides of the grooves are raised and the length increased to about 150 millimeters. The orientation of the grooves is the same as that of the scorpion. In the picture of the 59th min, a part of the regular structure of the scorpion appeared. On the 93rd minute, the Scorpion apparently recovered completely from the soil that filled it, consisting of a layer probably not exceeding 1 to 2 centimeters. Thus, the rescue operation of the object took about 1.5 hours. One can assume that this indicates its limited physical abilities. On the 119th minute, it was no longer visible. Other scientists who analyzed the images theorized that the Scorpion object could simply have been a bit of dirt thrown out as the lander was drilling into the ground for samples. But Dr. Leonid responded by stating that all drilling activity had stopped around 30 minutes after landing, leaving a long 1-hour window before the Scorpion object appeared, and hence couldn't possibly have been detached dirt. The doctor also supported his claims with the fact that all the dirt observed in the images was stationary and remained the same throughout, but the Scorpion object appeared to be missing in some images. The doctor concluded his publication by stating that it's possible that loose debris from the drill could have buried the Scorpion object during the first hour of landing, and due to the slow nature and physical capabilities of the suspected creature, it took it that long to crawl out from underneath the dirt. He also theorized that the creature possibly moved so slowly that it took it an extra hour to completely move from the immediate vicinity of the lander, hence why it appeared to be missing in later frames. Since the images were taken over 30 years ago, there was no way to fully confirm the good doctor's theories, but another recent study appears to support the doctor's claims of life on Venus, but this time it wasn't on the ground, but almost 30 kilometers up in the Venusian atmosphere. The Pioneer mission embarked on by the US to Venus, which had 4 small probes map the atmosphere of the planet in 1978, but a recent reanalysis of the data supports the existence of phosphine, a gas only known to be produced by living organisms. A team at Cardiff University led by Jane Greaves announced they had discovered the existence of phosphine in the planet's atmosphere. This discovery was bizarre to say the least, as phosphine is a gas only produced by microbes or carefully controlled laboratory conditions. The team stated that the phosphine gas has been found at about 30 kilometers above the surface of Venus, an area in the atmosphere much like the Earth, with reduced pressure, low carbon dioxide levels, and temperatures as low as 30 to 50 degrees Celsius. This layer of the atmosphere is probably the most similar environment to Earth than anywhere else in our entire solar system, including Mars. Scientists have theorized that the discovery of phosphine in this particular layer of the atmosphere just might be the indication of life on Venus. The team has called their theory the life in the clouds hypothesis, stating that it might be possible for Earth-like organisms to exist in the stable portion of the atmosphere using the abundant amounts of sulfur as food and releasing phosphine gas as a waste product. This would surely explain the reduced levels of sulfur in this layer of the atmosphere, as it would be consumed in a recurring cycle by these organisms. Another unexplainable fact that seems to support this theory is the presence of a layer of unidentified particles in the planet's atmosphere, which seem to absorb ultraviolet light in the same way some microbes do here on Earth. These particles have been tagged the unknown absorbers and have even been observed to be the same size as bacteria, having a characteristic non-circular shape as well. But other scientists have also taken a look at the data published by Jane Greaves and her team and have stated that although the theory looks plausible, there is still something unaccounted for. The levels of phosphine discovered are in much smaller amounts than anticipated, and if there were indeed organisms consuming sulfur and giving off some kind of waste, there should be traces of these waste chemicals. Analysis of the data is yet to showcase any such signs of any other chemicals that could be characterized as organic waste in the Venusian atmosphere. While there still remains speculation about the existence of these supposed organisms, biologists have stated that life on Earth evolved following the morphology and chemical composition of our planet. Therefore, we shouldn't expect life on every planet to follow the same pattern and leave room for explained occurrences, since every planet has its own unique evolutionary journey. While the scientific community still debates the possibility of life on Venus, NASA is taking active steps to study these organic phenomena by launching 2 new missions to this effect. The missions, which have been codenamed Da Vinci and Veritas, have already been commissioned and will launch sometime in 2028. And NASA isn't the only space agency setting its sights on Venus. The European Space Agency has also commissioned its own project tagged the Envision mission, set to launch on its way to Venus in the early 2030s. With these missions already in the works, there has been speculation on the possible colonization of Venus. Of course, there is the issue of scorching temperatures and bone-crushing pressures, but there could be a solution to these problems. Due to the dense atmosphere on Venus, there have been plans to use that in building structures that have been tagged floating cities. These cities would be sealed and filled with oxygen and nitrogen, which would work the same way helium works on Earth, by lifting sealed objects. With the aid of additional thruster engines, we would have established for ourselves floating colonies in the Venusian atmosphere. This might sound like something out of a sci-fi movie and might seem unattainable, but NASA has taken the idea very seriously. The agency has already commissioned a study into the concept with a project named High Altitude Venus Operational Concept, or Project HAVOC for short. While most interplanetary focus remains fixed on Mars, there might be renewed interest in our closest neighbor Venus in the coming decade. Unlike Mars, Venus's proximity to the Sun gives more opportunities for harnessing solar energy in unprecedented amounts for powering whatever structures we might need to survive the harsh Venusian atmosphere. So the question remains, are there truly living organisms on Venus, and is the colonization of the harsh Venusian atmosphere possible? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and we'll see you in the next video.